Jonathan Hale is a self-made billionaire who knows everything about numbers and nothing about people. Raised in a cold, fractured home, he learned early that silence was safer than affection. Now in his late 30s, his life follows a rigid loop. Work. Return to his empty glass mansion, cook a perfect steak, sleep alone. Smiling feels unfamiliar. Touch feels unnecessary. Love feels theoretical. When his board insists he appear human for a Valentine's charity gala, Jonathan does the only logical thing. He hires someone to play the role. Esther is clumsy, warm, painfully real. Short, talkative, armed with dimples and zero fear of awkwardness. She believes Valentine's Day should feel like something. Shared food, teasing, closeness, laughter. Jonathan believes feelings are distractions. Their contract is for one day. But Esther doesn't perform love. She practices it, and as she gently closes the space Jonathan keeps around himself, he realizes the most dangerous thing he's ever risked isn't his fortune. It's his heart.
Esther's point of view.
I thought Valentine's jobs were supposed to be embarrassing at worst. Awkward dinners, fake laughter, a man who talked too much or not at all, roses maybe, cheap cologne, an uncomfortable goodbye. This one came with rules. Strict ones. No photos. No personal questions. No expectations beyond the day. Dress elegant, neutral colours preferred. Arrive at exactly 4:30 p.m. The pay was obscene. I reread the message at least 5 times, convinced there had to be a catch hidden between the lines. There wasn't. Just a location pinned to a part of the city that didn't feel real to people like me, and a name signed at the bottom. Jonathan Hale. I didn't Google him. That wasn't bravery, it was instinct. Something told me this job wasn't about who he was to the world. It was about who he wasn't to anyone. The gate opened without a word when I arrived. No guard stepping out. No voice crackling through a speaker. Just black iron sliding aside like it already knew I was expected. The house, no, mansion, rose out of the hill in glass and stone, sharp lines cutting into the sky. It didn't look warm. It didn't look loved. It looked precise, untouched, like a place designed to impress from a distance and remain empty up close. I smoothed my dress down, adjusted my heels, and took a breath. You're just playing a role, I reminded myself. You've done this before. But my chest felt tight anyway. The door opened before I could knock. He stood there already dressed, already composed, like he'd been waiting in the exact spot for an exact second. Tall, broad shoulders, dark hair brushed back with intention, not style. His face was serious, not cold, just unreadable, like emotion was something he'd once studied and decided not to major in. Esther, he said, not a question. Jonathan, I replied, smiling automatically. He nodded once and stepped aside, allowing me in. No compliments, no lingering look, no awkward pause. That should have made things easier. Instead, it made the silence heavier. The inside of the house was immaculate. Too immaculate. Every surface shone. No clutter, no warmth, no evidence of life beyond necessity. Even the air smelled neutral, like it had been filtered of personality. Would you like something to drink? He asked. Yes, please, I said, then stopped myself. Whatever you're having is fine. He paused at that, just a fraction of a second. I don't drink, he said. Oh, I blinked. Then water is perfect. He handed me a glass himself, not delegated, not distant, just careful. We stood across from each other in the living room, a wide space with too much room between us. I took a small step closer. He didn't move, but his shoulders tensed, like I'd crossed an invisible line. Noted. I want to be clear, he said, folding his hands behind his back. This arrangement is for appearances only. I am not experienced in this area. In this area. The way he said it, formal, almost apologetic, made something twist in my chest. That's okay, I said gently. Neither are most people. They just pretend better. His eyes flicked to mine, curious, assessing. I won't, he said. Pretend. That surprised me into a soft laugh. Good, then neither will I. Another pause, longer this time. I've prepared dinner, he said, if that's acceptable. You cooked? Yes. I followed him into the kitchen, heels clicking softly against stone floors that had probably never heard a misstep. The kitchen was stunning in the way museums are, beautiful but untouched, everything arranged with military precision. A steak rested on a plate, perfectly cooked, no garnish, no wine, no candles. You eat this every day, don't you? I asked before I could stop myself. He stiffened. Yes. I smiled, not teasing, not pitying, just honest. Then tonight we change one thing. I don't see the necessity. Jonathan, I interrupted softly, turning to face him. Valentine's Day isn't about necessity, it's about intention. He looked at me like I'd spoken another language. So I reached past him and lit a candle sitting untouched on the counter. Then another. I turned on soft music from my phone and set it down. I moved the plates closer together. Each small action felt like rebellion. He watched me do it all without stopping me. That, I said, gesturing between us, is what people do together. I see, he murmured, but his eyes didn't leave my hands. We sat. Not close, not far, a careful distance. So, I said lightly, breaking into the quiet, tell me something you enjoy. He thought about it too long. Efficiency. I laughed before I could stop myself. Okay, second try. Something that makes you feel good. He frowned. Productivity. Third try. No thinking. Silence. I don't know, he finally admitted. There it was. Not arrogance, not coldness. Honesty. Something in me softened. That's okay, I said. We've got the whole day. He nodded slowly, like the idea unsettled him. As we ate, I noticed how precise his movements were, how he never touched my hand accidentally, how he watched my expressions like he was memorizing reactions instead of enjoying the moment. You don't have to perform, I told him gently. I'm not, he said. Then quieter. I don't know how. The words hit harder than I expected. I glanced at him, really looked this time. The man who had everything except practice at being human. The man who owned a mansion but had no idea how to share space. It's okay to learn, I said, even at your age. That earned me the smallest reaction yet. His lips twitched, not a smile, but close. And somehow, that felt like the beginning of something dangerous. Because for the first time since I took the job, I wasn't thinking about the contract. I was thinking about him. And I had a feeling Valentine's Day was about to ruin us both. Morning light found its way into the mansion the same way I had the night before. Quietly, without permission. I noticed it first because the house didn't change with it. No warmth crept in. No signs of a day beginning. The place stayed frozen in the same pristine stillness, like time didn't dare behave differently here. I stood in the guest bathroom, staring at my reflection, smoothing down my dress for the third time, even though it didn't need it. My hair fell into place naturally, curls soft around my face. I smiled at myself out of habit. Get it together, Esther, I thought. You're here to play a role, not analyze a man like a psychology thesis. Still, something about Jonathan Hale pulled at me. Not in a romantic way, not yet, but in the way abandoned places do. Like you wonder who once lived there. What laughter sounded like before it disappeared. I found him in the kitchen. Same place, same posture, same routine. He stood at the counter, sleeves rolled with surgical precision, flipping a steak in a pan like it was an equation he'd solved 1,000 times already. The smell hit me instantly, rich, warm, grounding. You cook steak for breakfast too? I asked lightly. Yes. Of course he did. Every day? I leaned against the counter watching him. No eggs, pancakes, cereal? Have you ever woken up and thought, I want something different today? He didn't look at me. No. That answer wasn't arrogant. It wasn't stubborn. It was factual. I studied him from where I stood. His movements were controlled, economical. Nothing wasted, nothing impulsive. Even his breathing felt measured, like emotion might disrupt the rhythm if he let it. When was the last time you ate with someone else? I asked. He hesitated. Years ago, he said finally. My chest tightened before I could stop it. I masked it with a smile. Then today counts as a big deal. I don't consider it that way. I know, I said softly, but I do. He plated the steak and set it down across from an empty chair. Then he stepped back, waiting, like he wasn't sure what came next. Sit with me, I said. I am sitting, he replied, confused. I gestured to the chair closer to mine. That one. There it was, that invisible line again. Jonathan looked at the chair like it might bite him. That's unnecessary proximity, he said. I raised a brow. It's called company. Silence stretched between us. He stared at the space, jaw tightening slightly, like he was deciding whether the cost outweighed the risk. Then, slowly, he pulled the chair closer. Sat. Still a safe distance, but closer and sat. Progress. We ate in silence at first, not the awkward kind, more like the quiet of two people trying to figure out the rules of a game one of them had never played. You don't ask many questions, he observed. That's because I'm watching, I replied. For what? For what you don't say. His fork paused mid-air. And what am I not saying? That you're uncomfortable, I said, and that you're trying very hard not to be. His gaze lifted to mine. Something unreadable passed through his eyes. I don't see the benefit of pretending comfort, he said. I'm simply unused to shared space. That's okay, I said again. Shared space can be learned. I wasn't aware that was a skill. I laughed softly. Everything important is. After breakfast, I suggested we go outside. Outside? He echoed. Yes, people go outside together. Walk, talk, pretend they don't own billion-dollar companies. I don't pretend, he said automatically. I know, I smiled. That's why this will be fun. The garden behind the mansion was expansive and flawless, and just as lifeless. Perfect hedges, perfect paths. No mess, no chaos, no signs of joy. We walked side by side, the distance between us precise. So, I said, hands clasped behind my back, what do couples do for fun, in your opinion? I don't have one. Guess. He frowned. They attend events, appear supportive. I stopped walking. Jonathan took 2 more steps before realizing I wasn't beside him anymore. He turned, brows knitting slightly. That's not fun, I said. That's a performance. I don't see the distinction. I stepped closer to him deliberately, closing the space until he had to look down at me. The height difference was obvious. Him tall and composed, me short and very much in his personal bubble. Fun, I said gently, is laughing when something goes wrong, sitting too close, sharing food, touching without a reason. His breath hitched, just barely. That sounds inefficient, he murmured. And yet, I teased softly, people keep doing it. We stood there longer than necessary. I noticed how still he was, how his hands curled slightly at his sides like he was holding himself back from something. Or maybe everything. I won't cross any boundaries, I said quietly, unless you let me. He swallowed. I don't know where they are, he admitted. That broke something open inside me. Then we'll find them together, I said. We resumed walking, closer now, not touching, but not distant either. When we reached a bench, I sat without asking, patting the space beside me. Jonathan hesitated again, then sat. Our shoulders didn't touch, but they almost did. And for him, that was everything. I glanced at him from the corner of my eye and caught him watching my smile like it was something fragile, something rare. You don't smile much, I said. I don't see the need. Well, I shrugged, grinning, I smile enough for the both of us. Something in his expression softened, not enough to be called warmth, but enough to be human. And as we sat there in the quiet garden, I realized something important. Jonathan Hale wasn't difficult. He was unopened. And somehow, I was already reaching for the seal. By mid-afternoon, I understood something important about Jonathan Hale. He didn't resist closeness because he disliked it. He resisted it because he didn't know what came after. The mansion shifted with daylight, but only slightly. Sunlight poured through the glass walls, turning the floors warm beneath my feet, yet Jonathan moved through the space as if it was still night, controlled, careful, untouched by the change. I, on the other hand, was bored. Not with him. Never with him. With the distance. "So," I said, breaking the quiet as we stood in the living room again, miles of polished floor between us. "We're officially pretending to be a couple today, right?" "That is the agreement," he said, nodding once. "Then we're doing it wrong." He frowned. "Define wrong." I walked toward him without warning. One step, then another. Slow, intentional. Jonathan stayed where he was, spine straight, jaw tightening the closer I got. When I stopped, we were well inside that invisible boundary he kept around himself. I could see the flecks of colour in his eyes now. Smell the faint, clean scent of him. Soap, steel, something warm beneath it. "Couples don't stand this far apart," I said softly. He didn't move away. "That's subjective," he replied, but his voice was tighter than before. I tilted my head, studying him. "You're not afraid of me." "I'm not afraid," he said quickly. "No," I agreed. "You're cautious." His gaze dropped to my mouth before he could stop himself, then snapped back to my eyes like he'd been caught doing something illegal. "Interesting." "Sit with me," I said, gesturing to the couch this time. Not across the room, not on opposite ends, next to me. "That's unnecessary," he repeated, like the word had been programmed into him. "So is pretending to be human," I smiled. "Yet here we are." The pause stretched. I could practically hear him calculating outcomes, risks, consequences, like closeness was a contract he hadn't reviewed yet. Finally, he walked toward the couch. Sat. Not next to me. 1 seat away. I sighed dramatically. "Jonathan?" "Yes?" "That space?" I pointed between us. "That's where loneliness lives." His fingers curled against his knee. "I'm accustomed to it," he said. "I know," I replied quietly. "That doesn't mean you have to keep it." I shifted closer, just enough that our arms brushed. He inhaled sharply. Didn't pull away. I turned on the music next. Soft, slow, nothing demanding. The kind of song people sway to without realizing they've moved. I stretched my legs out, curling them beneath me on the couch like I belonged there. "You're very comfortable," he observed. "I'm trying to show you how," I said lightly. He glanced at my feet tucked beside him, at the way I leaned back, relaxed, at the ease in my posture that came from years of shared couches, shared spaces, shared moments. "You make it look simple," he said. "It is," I replied, "when you stop guarding yourself like a vault." That earned me a look, sharp, curious. "I don't guard myself," he said. I laughed softly. "Jonathan, you guard yourself from air." For a moment I thought I'd pushed too far. His shoulders stiffened, his expression closing off like a door sliding shut. Then he surprised me. "I was raised to believe attachment was a liability," he said. "Flat, honest. Distance prevents loss." The words landed heavier than I expected. I softened instantly, turned toward him fully. "And did it work?" I asked gently. He didn't answer. That was answer enough. I reached for the coffee table and picked up a bowl of strawberries I'd brought earlier, something red, sweet, alive. I popped one into my mouth, chewing slowly. "You want one?" I asked. "No." "Have you tried one?" "No." I smiled. "Of course not." I leaned closer and held one up to him. Open. He stared at the fruit like it might explode. "I don't—" "Jonathan," I interrupted gently, "it's a strawberry, not a trap." His lips parted hesitantly. I placed it there, my fingers brushing his mouth for half a second. He froze. Chewed. Swallowed. "It's acceptable," he said. I laughed. High praise. Something eased between us after that. Not dramatically, just a fraction. Enough that the silence felt less like a wall and more like a pause. "Do you always take charge?" he asked suddenly. "Only when someone clearly needs it," I replied. "And do I?" he asked. I met his gaze, didn't tease this time. "Yes," I said, "but not because you're weak, because no one ever taught you how." His eyes darkened, not with anger but with something deeper, something unnameable. Later, as the afternoon bled into evening, I found myself standing in front of him again, closer than before, close enough that my head barely reached his chest. "People usually hold hands," I said casually. He looked down at me. "Why?" "Because it feels grounding." "Grounding from what?" "From being alone," I said. Another long pause. Then, slowly, he extended his hand. Didn't grab mine, didn't pull, just offered it. I slipped my fingers into his. His hand was warm, large, steady, despite the slight tremor he tried to hide. "There," I said softly. "You're doing fine." He swallowed. "This feels unfamiliar." I smiled up at him. "Most good things do at first." We stood like that for a moment too long. The music hummed softly behind us. His gaze dropped again, to my lips. The space between us shifted. Charged. I felt it. He felt it. Neither of us moved. Not yet. Because some moments need to breathe before they break. And something told me the next time I stepped into his space, it wouldn't just be practice anymore. It would be a line neither of us could uncross. By the time evening settled into the mansion, I realized Jonathan lived like night was a permanent condition. Lights adjusted automatically as the sun dipped, but the mood didn't soften. The house didn't warm. It stayed sharp-edged, controlled, pristine, like intimacy had never been invited to exist here. I changed into a darker dress, something simple but soft, the kind that moved when I walked. Not because I was trying to seduce him, though that thought crossed my mind, but because I wanted to feel like a woman, not a prop in a contract. Jonathan was already in the dining area when I returned. The table had changed. Candles flickered low and steady, their flames reflected in the glass walls around us. He'd added linen napkins, real plates, 2 glasses, still empty, still no wine, but the effort was there. I stopped short. "You did this?" I asked. "Yes," he said, standing stiffly at the head of the table. "I observed your adjustments earlier and inferred that atmosphere contributes to the experience." I smiled before I could stop myself. "A real one." "That's very thoughtful." He nodded once, like he didn't quite know what to do with praise. We sat, this time closer than before, not touching, but near enough that I could feel his presence beside me, solid, warm, contained. The steak was perfect again. Of course it was. Jonathan didn't do imperfect. "What if I don't like it?" I teased lightly, cutting into it. "That would be unfortunate," he replied seriously, "but acceptable." I laughed. He watched me like he was filing the sound away for later. "You watch me a lot," I said, glancing up. "I'm learning," he admitted. "About what?" "You," he said simply. The word landed heavier than it should have. We ate slowly, talked a little. Not about childhoods or dreams, those felt too big, but about habits, preferences, small things. He listened intently, like every detail mattered. At some point my knee brushed his under the table. He stilled. Didn't pull away. Didn't lean in either. Just endured. That was the moment something in me shifted. Not desire, though it was there, simmering, but tenderness. A sudden sharp awareness that this man had never been taught how to receive closeness, that every inch I crossed was unfamiliar territory. "Jonathan," I said quietly. "Yes?" "Can I ask you something?" He nodded. "Have you ever been kissed?" The question hung between us, fragile as glass. His fork paused midair. "No," he said. "No embarrassment, no defensiveness. Just the truth." My heart squeezed painfully. "Oh," I murmured. Then gently, "Do you want to?" He considered the question like it was a negotiation with consequences. "I don't know what I'm supposed to want," he said finally. I reached for his hand across the table, slowly, giving him time to pull away if he needed to. He didn't. "Then let's not make it about want," I said softly. "Let's make it about curiosity." His fingers tightened around mine. Just a little. I stood, still holding his hand, and stepped closer to him. He rose automatically, towering over me. The height difference felt more pronounced now, the space between our faces unfamiliar and charged. I could see the uncertainty in his eyes, the restraint, the fear of doing something wrong. "This doesn't have to be perfect," I whispered. "It rarely is." I leaned in. Too fast. Too impulsive. Our noses bumped awkwardly. His head tilted the wrong way. My lips brushed his cheek instead of his mouth. We froze. For half a second, it was painfully awkward, clumsy, unscripted. Then I laughed, soft, breathy, a little embarrassed. "I'm sorry," I said. "That was—" "I failed," he said immediately. "No," I corrected gently, stepping back just enough to meet his eyes. "You tried." His jaw tightened. "I don't like failing." I reached up, placing my hand on his chest, felt his heartbeat, fast, uncontrolled, human. "Then don't think of it as a test," I said. "Think of it as practice." He swallowed hard. I leaned in again, slower this time, deliberate, adjusting for the height difference, rising just slightly onto my toes. Our lips brushed. Barely. He didn't move, didn't respond, didn't pull away either. It was the most tentative kiss I'd ever experienced, soft, uncertain, incomplete, like he was waiting for instructions that never came. I pulled back gently. Jonathan looked stunned, like the world had shifted and no one had warned him. "I'm sorry," he said again. "I didn't—" "Jonathan," I interrupted softly, smiling up at him. "You didn't ruin anything." "But it wasn't—" He trailed off, frustration flickering across his face. "It was exactly what it needed to be," I said. "Awkward, honest, real." He stared at me like he didn't quite believe that was allowed. I stepped back, giving him space again, letting him breathe. "We don't have to do more," I said gently. "Not tonight." He nodded slowly, relief and disappointment warring in his expression. Later, alone in the guest room, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, replaying the moment over and over again. The hesitation. The almost. The way his hands had hovered like he didn't trust himself to touch. I didn't know it then, but somewhere down the hall, Jonathan Hale was doing the same thing. Replaying. Analyzing. Trying to understand what had just happened. And something told me that awkward, unfinished kiss had already crossed a line neither of us could undo. Because firsts don't fade. They linger. And this one had just changed the shape of his world. I packed slowly. Not because I had much to pack, just my overnight bag, my heels by the door, the dress folded carefully, but because I wasn't ready to accept what leaving meant. The mansion was quiet again. Too quiet. No music, no movement, no sign that anything had shifted since the awkward kiss, except the weight in my chest that hadn't been there before. I stood in the guest room for a long moment, fingers resting on the zipper of my bag, listening to the hum of a house that had already returned to its natural state, silent, controlled, untouched. "This is where it ends," I told myself. "You were hired to help him through a day, not to change his life." Still, disappointment crept in uninvited. Jonathan hadn't come to check on me, hadn't asked if I was comfortable, hadn't said anything at all after dinner. He'd retreated the way people do when they don't know how to process something that went off script. And I understood that. I really did. But understanding didn't stop it from hurting. I slipped my shoes on and stepped into the hallway, bag slung over my shoulder. My footsteps echoed softly as I made my way toward the front door. The same door I'd walked through yesterday with curiosity and caution. Now, it felt heavier. I reached for the handle. "Esther?" His voice stopped me cold. I turned slowly. Jonathan stood at the end of the hall, Suit jacket discarded, sleeves rolled again like he'd forgotten to finish putting himself together. His posture was stiff, but his eyes were unsettled. Searching. "I didn't hear you," he said. "I was trying not to disturb you," I replied gently. He frowned. "You weren't a disturbance." The words landed awkwardly, but I caught the intention behind them. I assumed... I hesitated, then decided honesty was kinder. "I assumed you needed space." "I always need space," he said, then quieter, "but I didn't want you to leave yet." Something in my chest cracked open. "I thought," I admitted softly, "that maybe I'd pushed too much." He took a step closer, then stopped, like he wasn't sure he was allowed to keep going. "I don't know how much is too much," he said. "I only know that when you left the room, the house felt... wrong." That word again. Wrong. I swallowed hard. "Jonathan," I said, keeping my voice steady, "you don't owe me anything beyond the contract." "I know," he said immediately. "That's not why I stopped you." I waited. He struggled visibly now, jaw tight, hands flexing, frustration written across his face like he was fighting an internal war without a map. "Did I do something incorrectly?" he asked finally. The question stunned me. "What?" I breathed. "Tonight," he continued. "The dinner, the conversation, the kiss." I reviewed the sequence repeatedly, and I can't identify the point where your demeanor changed. My heart broke a little right then. "Oh, Jonathan," I said softly, stepping closer without thinking. "This isn't a performance review." His brow furrowed. "Then why do I feel like I failed?" "Because no one ever taught you that effort counts," I thought. Out loud, I said, "You didn't fail. You tried something unfamiliar. That's not failure. That's courage." He stared at me, searching my face like he was afraid I'd take the words back. "I don't know what will happen after today," he said. "I don't know how to maintain this." "This," I echoed gently. He gestured vaguely between us. "The proximity, the ease. You make it seem temporary, like something that expires at midnight." I smiled sadly. "That's because it does, at least professionally." His shoulders sagged just a fraction. "I don't want to return to how it was," he said quietly, "but I don't know what the alternative looks like." I reached out, placing my hand over his, hesitant at first, then steady. "Neither do most people," I said. "They just take the risk anyway." He looked down at our hands like he was committing the sensation to memory. "You don't feel obligated to stay?" he asked. "No," I said honestly. "If I stay, it's because I want to." Silence stretched between us, thick with unspoken things. Then he surprised me again. "Will you stay?" he asked. Not commanding, not transactional, just asking. I met his eyes, saw the vulnerability there, the man behind the billionaire, the boy behind the control. "Yes," I said softly, "for tonight." Relief flickered across his face so quickly he probably didn't realize it. "Thank you," he said. I smiled. "You're welcome." We stood there for a moment longer, neither of us moving, neither of us ready to define what staying meant. Midnight wasn't here yet, and for the first time, neither of us was in a hurry to meet it.
Jonathan's point of view.
Silence has always been my preferred state. It doesn't ask questions. It doesn't expect answers. It doesn't watch. I built my life around it deliberately. The house, the routines, the distance, every detail engineered to ensure nothing unpredictable ever took root. Predictability is safety. Solitude is control. Or it was. Esther's presence disrupted that balance in ways I had not accounted for. Even now, with her footsteps soft down the hall, the air feels altered, warmer, heavier, like the walls themselves are paying attention. I remain in the living room, standing where I've stood countless nights before, staring at the glass expanse that overlooks the city. The city has always looked small from here, manageable. Tonight, it feels intrusive. I close my eyes and inhale slowly, counting. A habit learned early. Breathe in for 4, hold for 4, exhale for 6. Order restores equilibrium. It doesn't work. My mind refuses to settle. Images intrude uninvited. Her smile, unguarded and bright. The way her laughter filled rooms that had never been meant for sound. The feel of her fingers sliding into my hand earlier. Warm, grounding, unfamiliar. I flex my hand now, as if to erase the memory. It persists. I was raised in a house where affection was a currency no one spent. My parents existed in parallel, not partnership. My father was present in body, absent in all other measurable ways. My mother measured love in expectations and disappointment, never touch. I learned early that achievement earned acknowledgement, not warmth. There were no hugs, no shared meals, no laughter, only rules. By 12, I understood that connection was a liability. People leave, people disappoint, people fail you in ways silence never does. So I learned to need nothing. By the time I built this empire, solitude felt like success. Until Esther. She doesn't behave like someone afraid of silence. She steps into it, reshapes it, bends it around her presence like it's something malleable instead of sacred. She laughs at moments that don't warrant it. She sits too close without apology. She touches without asking permission first. And worst of all, she stays. I replay the kiss again, against my will. The misalignment, the hesitation, the way her lips brushed mine like a question instead of a demand. I felt frozen, not from lack of desire, but from an overload of sensation. My body reacted before my mind could catalog the experience. I failed to respond. Failure is unacceptable. I retreat to my bedroom eventually, shutting the door with more force than necessary. The room is immaculate, orderly, familiar. I strip off my shirt, toss it aside, and sit on the edge of the bed, elbows braced on my knees. My heart rate is elevated. I analyze possible causes. Physical proximity, emotional exposure, deviation from routine. None of it explains the tightness in my chest. I lie back and stare at the ceiling, the vast emptiness above me, suddenly oppressive instead of calming. For the first time in years, the bed feels too large, unwitnessed. My gaze drifts to the pillows beside me. The thought comes unbidden, unwelcome. Practice. The word embarrasses me, even alone. But embarrassment is preferable to ignorance. I take one of the pillows and adjust it, angling it as precisely as possible. This is absurd, I tell myself, inefficient. Yet my body moves with intent, memory guiding motion. I lean in. The sensation is wrong, unresponsive, cold. I pull back immediately, irritation flaring. Again. This time slower, adjusting angle. Pressure. Still wrong. I exhale sharply and sit back, running a hand through my hair. This is not something that can be mastered through repetition alone. There was something in Esther's eyes when she kissed me. Patience, permission, a lack of judgment. That realization unsettles me more than the kiss itself. I don't know how to exist in a space where failure doesn't result in withdrawal. I don't know how to stay. A soft knock interrupts my thoughts. I freeze. Jonathan? Esther's voice filters through the door. Careful, not demanding entry. Yes, I answered immediately, standing. I opened the door to find her there in one of my oversized shirts, sleeves rolled, hair loose around her shoulders. The sight of her in my space, my clothing, registers like a violation and a revelation all at once. I couldn't sleep, she says softly. I didn't mean to intrude. You're not intruding, I reply too quickly. She studies my face, head tilted slightly, like she's reading something I'm not aware I've written. You okay? She asks. I consider lying. I don't. I'm recalibrating, I say. She smiles gently. That sounds uncomfortable. It is. She steps closer, closing the distance without crossing it entirely, respecting the boundary even as she challenges it. You don't have to figure everything out tonight, she says. Nothing ends if you don't solve it. The statement conflicts with everything I've ever known. Things always end, I say quietly. Not everything, she replies. She waits, doesn't force the moment, doesn't fill the silence. And for the first time, silence doesn't feel like control. It feels like space being shared. I've never had anyone stay before, I admit. The words feel foreign on my tongue. Her expression softens, not with pity, but understanding. Well, she says lightly, now you have. Something in my chest loosens at that. Just a fraction. But it's enough to scare me. Because if Esther stays, silence will never belong to me again, and I'm no longer sure I want it to. I wake before dawn, not because of habit, though habit is usually enough, but because my body refuses rest. There is a pressure beneath my ribs that does not belong to any known physical ailment. I catalog symptoms automatically: elevated heart rate, heightened awareness, disrupted sleep cycle. Cause: proximity. Esther is still here. The realization lands with equal parts relief and alarm. I lie still, listening. The house breathes differently when she's in it. Subtle sounds, fabric shifting, a soft exhale from the guest room down the hall, register like anomalies in an otherwise controlled system. I don't move. I don't want to disturb the variables. Instead, I think. Closeness, I decide, must have parameters. Distance measured in feet. Duration measured in minutes. Touch measured in pressure and placement. If I can define it, I can manage it. That's how everything else in my life works. I rise quietly and dress with practiced efficiency. The mirror reflects a man, composed, controlled, unaffected. It's a convincing illusion. I tighten my watch, square my shoulders, and step into the kitchen. Esther is already there. She stands barefoot at the counter, hair a soft mess, humming quietly to herself while she pours coffee. My coffee. Into a mug she's chosen at random. She turns when she senses me, smiling like this is the most natural thing in the world. Morning, she says. The word feels intimate, unnecessary, effective. Good morning, I reply, because it's expected. She notices the stiffness in my posture immediately. She always does. It irritates me, how observant she is, yet I find I don't want to correct it. You didn't sleep, she says, not accusing. Just stating. I did, I lied, adequately. She hums, unconvinced, and slides a mug toward me. Coffee helps with recalibrating. I take it. Our fingers brush. Contact duration, less than 1 second. Effect, disproportionate. I pull back too quickly, nearly spilling the coffee. She notices, pretends not to. We sat at the counter, side by side, not touching, close enough that I can feel the heat from her arm. I adjust my position by a few inches, attempting to optimize comfort. It doesn't help. So, she says lightly, swinging her legs on the stool, what's today's plan, Mr. Billionaire? I don't have one, I answer. She grins. That's new. It's temporary, I say. Everything is, she replies easily. I don't like that answer. I observe her instead, how relaxed she is in my space, how she treats my home like it isn't a museum. She sips coffee, grimaces at the bitterness, adds sugar without asking. A violation. A welcome one. I've been thinking, I say. Her eyes flick to mine. That sounds dangerous. I'm attempting to understand the rules of this. I gesture vaguely between us. There aren't rules, she says. That's kind of the point. There are always rules, I insist, even if they're unspoken. She studies me for a moment, then nods. Okay, what do you think the rules are? I consider. Proximity should increase gradually. Abrupt closeness causes discomfort. She raises a brow. For you? Yes. Fair. Touch should be purposeful, I continue, not random. She smiles. I like random things. I've noticed. And emotional disclosure should be limited, I finished. Excess leads to vulnerability. She leans closer, chin resting in her hand. You say vulnerability like it's a disease. It's a liability, I correct. Only if you're alone, she says softly. That sentence disrupts the entire framework. I look away, jaw tightening. You're making this more complex than necessary. No, she says gently. You're trying to make it smaller than it is. I stand abruptly, needing distance. The room feels too tight, the air too charged. I need to work, I say. On Valentine's? She teases. I always work. She doesn't stop me as I move toward my office. That restraint unsettles me more than pursuit would have. I expect relief once I'm surrounded by screens, numbers, and familiar logic. It doesn't come. My focus fractures. I reread the same report 3 times without absorbing a word. My mind drifts back to the kitchen, to the warmth of her presence, the ease of her smile. This is inefficient. I abandon the attempt and return to the living room. Esther sits on the couch, knees tucked under her, flipping through a book she found somewhere in the house. How she finds things here is beyond me. I was certain most of the rooms were empty. You don't own many books, she notes without looking up. I don't reread, I say. She closes the book. Some things are meant to be revisited. I sit across from her. Too far. I adjust, sitting beside her instead. The movement is deliberate, controlled. She notices, doesn't comment. My heart rate increases again. This, I say, gesturing to the space between us, is uncomfortable. She smiles. But you chose it. Yes. Why? I search for the answer and find none that satisfy logic. Data collection, I say finally. She laughs. You're ridiculous. Perhaps. Her laughter fades into something softer. She turns slightly, her knee brushing mine. The contact is light, accidental, or intentional. I can't tell. My body reacts instantly. Breath shallow, muscles taut. I do not move away. This isn't something you can calculate, she says quietly. You have to feel it. I don't trust feelings, I admit. I know. She reaches out then, slow, visible, giving me every chance to object. Her hand rests on my forearm. Not gripping. Just there. Contact duration. Sustained. Effect. Profound. The urge to pull away battles with something stronger. The desire to stay. To understand. To not retreat. I stay. Her thumb moves slightly. A small, absent motion. My pulse jumps beneath her touch. I close my eyes. This is dangerous. This doesn't feel efficient, I murmur. No, she agrees softly. It feels human. I open my eyes and meet her gaze. Something passes between us. Recognition, maybe. Or inevitability. For the first time in my life, I understand something without being able to explain it. Closeness is not a problem to be solved. It's a risk to be taken, and I am already standing too close to the edge. The sensation begins subtly. Not with anger, not with jealousy. With awareness, Esther is laughing. It's not directed at me this time. We're in the kitchen, my kitchen, and she's speaking to one of the staff members, a woman who has worked for me for years. The exchange is harmless, polite, normal. Esther's smile is bright, her dimples deepening as she thanks her for something insignificant. And something inside me tightens. I don't understand it at first. I catalog the reaction automatically. Jaw tension, increased pulse, a sudden need to interrupt the interaction. None of these align with any rational threat assessment. The staff member isn't inappropriate. Esther isn't encouraging familiarity. There is no violation. So why does it bother me? I step closer without thinking. Not aggressively. Not visibly. Just enough. The staff member glances at me and immediately straightens, offering a respectful nod before excusing herself. Esther turns back to me, brow lifting slightly. "You didn't have to scare her away," she says lightly. "I didn't," I replied. She concluded the interaction. She studies me. "You moved closer." "That was unintentional." She doesn't argue. She never does when she knows I'm lying to myself. Instead, she smiles slowly. "You're very present today." "I always am." "No," she says. "Today, you're aware." The distinction unsettles me. I decide to redirect. "Are you comfortable?" I ask. The question emerges sharper than intended. She tilts her head. "Yes." "You don't need anything?" I continued. "Food? Water? Privacy?" She laughs softly. "Jonathan, I'm not a guest who's overstayed her welcome." The word guest lands wrong. I don't like the implication that she doesn't belong here. I don't know when that line was crossed. "I prefer knowing where you are," I say instead, "in case you need something." Her expression softens, but there's curiosity there too. Testing. "Is that concern?" she asks, "or supervision?" I hesitate. "I'm not accustomed to sharing space," I say carefully. "Adjustment requires awareness." She steps closer. Too close. Her shoulder brushes my chest. "And does awareness include deciding things for me?" she asks gently. "No," I answered immediately. Too quickly. "I wouldn't." "You've already started," she interrupts us softly. "You choose where we sit, what we eat, when we move." I stiffen. "That's efficiency," I say, "not control." She looks up at me, eyes steady. Sometimes they look the same. I don't like that either. Later, we leave the house. It's my suggestion. Controlled exposure. Measured risk. We walk through a quiet street nearby. Nothing crowded. Nothing chaotic. Still, I feel exposed. Not because of the environment, but because Esther is beside me, drawing attention simply by existing the way she does. Someone glances at her. I notice. Someone smiles at her. I notice. My steps slow imperceptibly, placing myself half a pace ahead of her. A barrier, a buffer. She notices that too. "You do that a lot," she says. "Do what?" "Position yourself," she replies, "like you're shielding something." "I'm not," I say automatically. She stops walking. I take 2 steps before realizing she's no longer beside me. I turn. She's watching me with that same thoughtful expression, the one that feels like she's seeing through layers I've spent a lifetime building. "You don't have to protect me," she says. I know. "Then why do you?" The question sits heavy between us. "I don't like unpredictability," I say finally. "And I'm unpredictable." "No," I answered. "Other people are." The truth beneath that sentence scares me. We resume walking. Closer now. Our hands don't touch, but the space between us has narrowed enough to feel intentional. That night, back at the house, she changes into something soft and oversized. One of my shirts again. The sight hits harder this time. Less surprise. More claim. That's when I recognize the feeling. Not jealousy. Ownership. The realization is jarring. I don't own people. I never have. I don't want to. And yet, the idea of her being anywhere else, laughing elsewhere, sitting too close to someone else, creates a sharp discomfort I don't have language for. I don't tell her this. Instead, I say, "You can stay here tonight." "I already am." She smiles. I stop myself. Reframe. "You don't need to return to the guest room if you're uncomfortable." She studies me carefully. Are you asking me to stay, or are you telling yourself you won't mind if I do? The question hits precisely where it hurts. I don't mind, I say. She steps closer, looks up at me. You're very controlling, she says softly. Not accusing, observing. I'm aware. But you don't tell me what to do, she continued. You just shape the space. That's preferable, I reply. Only if the other person chooses to stay in it, she says. I hold her gaze. Would you? Yes, she answers, without hesitation. Something loosens in my chest. Later, when she's asleep, breathing slow, unguarded, I remain awake beside her, staring at the ceiling. Not touching. Not moving. Watching. Not out of fear she'll leave, but out of fear that I don't want her to. Territory, I realize, isn't always about possession. Sometimes it's about proximity, about wanting something close enough to protect, even from yourself. And I don't know how to stop. It happens without warning. That's the worst part. There is no calculation beforehand, no internal debate, no conscious decision. 1 second, I am observing. The next, something in my face moves on its own. I smile. It takes me a moment to realize what I've done. We're in the kitchen again. She's standing at the counter, sleeves of my shirt rolled too far up her arms, hair half pinned and half falling like she couldn't be bothered to decide. She's talking about nothing important. A story involving spilled coffee, a crooked sidewalk, and her absolute refusal to admit she trips often. I do not trip, she insists, pointing a spoon at me. The ground just attacks me sometimes. The absurdity of the statement bypasses every filter I have, and I smile. It's not polite, not restrained, not practiced. It's real, warm, uncontrolled, brief, but she sees it. Her words trail off, her eyes widen slightly, then soften. She doesn't react immediately, doesn't comment, doesn't tease. She just watches me like she's spotted something rare and doesn't want to scare it away. My face stills instantly. I straighten, step back, put distance between us like it's oxygen. What? I ask sharply. Her lips curve into a slow smile. Nothing? You were looking at me, I say. Yes, she replies simply. Why? She sets the spoon down and turns fully toward me. Because you smiled. I didn't. Her brow lifts. Jonathan. I don't smile, I say. The statement has always been true. Until now. You did, she says gently. Just now. The room feels smaller, the walls closer, like I've been exposed without armor. That was unintentional, I replied. A reflex. She takes a step closer. I step back immediately. Her smile fades, not hurt, but concerned. Hey, she says softly. I'm not making fun of you. I didn't say you were. But you're acting like you did something wrong. I don't answer, because I don't have the language for what that smile cost me. Smiling is surrender. It's proof of enjoyment, of connection. It invites response. It invites expectation. Expectation leads to disappointment. I turn away under the pretense of checking my phone, needing the barrier of a screen, of data, of something I can control. Behind me, I feel her presence. Still. Patient. Does it scare you? She asks quietly. I don't want to answer. Yes, I say anyway. She doesn't push. She never pushes when it matters. That's okay, she says. First smiles usually are. First. The word echoes too loudly. I leave the room shortly after, retreating to my office like a man fleeing a fire he doesn't understand. I close the door, lock it, sit at my desk and stare at nothing. My reflection in the black monitor stares back. I look different. Not softer. Not weaker. Less armored. I don't recognize myself. The smile replays in my mind, uninvited. The way my chest had loosened. The way the tension I'd carried for decades had slipped, just for a second. It was relief, and that's what frightens me. I don't allow myself relief. Relief implies struggle. Struggle implies need. Need implies vulnerability. I rub my face hard, as if I can wipe the expression away retroactively. Later, too quiet, too long later, I hear her moving through the house. The soft sounds of existence. Drawers. Footsteps. Life. I find her in the living room, curled on the couch with a blanket pulled up to her chin, watching something mindless on the screen. She looks smaller like this. Softer. Unprotected. The urge to sit beside her is immediate. I resist it. "Are you avoiding me?" she asks without looking up. "No," I say. She turns her head slowly. "Then why does it feel like you're running?" "I'm not running," I reply. "I'm stabilizing." She snorts softly. "You know, normal people just say they're overwhelmed." "I'm not normal." "No," she agrees, smiling faintly. "You're not." I sit at the far end of the couch. Too far. She notices. Always. "You smiled," she says again, quietly this time. "You don't have to punish yourself for it." "I'm not punishing myself." "Then what are you doing?" I stare at the wall across from us, preventing repetition. She turns fully toward me now, the show forgotten. "Why?" she asks. "Did it feel bad?" I don't answer immediately. "No," I say finally. "It felt good." The admission burns on the way out. She nods slowly. "Then maybe you don't need to stop it. Maybe you need to understand it." I shake my head. "Good things don't last." "That's not a rule," she says. "That's a wound." The word hits with surgical precision. I stand abruptly. "I need air." She watches me go, expression unreadable. I spend the night restless again, lying in the dark, staring at the ceiling. The smile haunts me, not because it happened, but because of what it promised. Joy, ease, connection, all things I've survived without, all things I suddenly want. And wanting is dangerous, because the more I allow myself to feel, the closer I come to something I swore I'd never be again. A man who hopes. I found the contract by accident. That's what I tell myself at first. In truth, I've been circling it for hours. It sits in the drawer of my desk, printed on thick paper, precise language, every clause reviewed and approved by law. It was supposed to be a safeguard. Clean edges, clear terms, no emotional ambiguity. I take it out and lay it flat. Duration, 1 day. Purpose, public appearance and private companionship. Boundaries, no obligation beyond agreed time frame. It reads exactly the way it always has. And yet every word feels false. Because nothing about this has been contained. Nothing about Esther fits inside those lines. She moved through my house like she belonged here, not as a temporary presence, but as a catalyst. She altered routines I'd spent years perfecting. She left traces, mugs out of place, laughter in rooms that had only known silence. She made the space human. I rubbed my thumb along the edge of the paper, irritation building, not at her, but at myself. This was supposed to be simple. I hired a woman to perform a role I didn't understand. I told myself it was about optics, about expectations, about appeasing people who insisted I appear relatable. The contract existed to ensure detachment. Instead, I broke it the moment I cared whether she stayed. I stand abruptly, pushing the chair back harder than necessary. The sound echoes through the office, sharp and accusatory. This ends tonight. That's the logical conclusion. Midnight approaches. The day expires. The terms conclude. Esther leaves, and order is restored. The thought tightens something in my chest. I leave the office and move through the house, searching for her without admitting that's what I'm doing. She's in the kitchen again, always the kitchen, standing on her toes to reach a shelf she shouldn't be touching. I stop in the doorway. She doesn't notice me at first. She's humming softly, completely unbothered by the fact that she's trespassing in a space I once considered untouchable. "Jonathan," she says suddenly, without turning, "you reorganize your shelves alphabetically." "Yes," I reply automatically. "That's adorable," she says. The word hits me sideways. I don't correct her. She turns, smiling when she sees me. That smile, the one that's been undoing me piece by piece, lands easily on her face. "Everything okay?" she asks. I consider lying. "I was reviewing the contract," I say instead. Her smile fades, not dramatically, but enough. "Oh." That single syllable feels heavier than it should. "It ends tonight," I continue. "At midnight." "I know," she says softly. "That was always the plan." She says it like she believes it. I envy that certainty. "You don't seem bothered," I observe. She shrugs. "I accepted the terms when I took the job." A job. The word shouldn't irritate me. It's accurate. It does anyway. "You can leave early if you prefer," I say. The suggestion tastes wrong. There's no requirement to stay until... "I don't want to leave early," she interrupts gently. The admission lands harder than any argument could. "Why?" I ask before I can stop myself. She studies me for a long moment. Not playful. Not teasing. Honest. "Because I don't think you're ready to be alone again yet," she says. I stiffen. "That's not your responsibility." "I know," she replies, "but caring isn't the same as obligation." There it is again. Caring. I turn away, needing space, needing control. "You were hired to play a role," I say tightly, "and you did it well, but this," I gesture vaguely between us, "isn't sustainable." She doesn't move closer. She doesn't retreat. "Do you want it to be?" she asks. The question is quiet, devastating. I don't answer immediately because the truth scares me. Yes, I want her to stay. I want the mornings, the noise, the disruption. I want the smile that slipped out and the way she noticed it like it mattered. But wanting implies loss. I don't know how to keep people, I say finally. I don't know how this continues without damage. She steps closer then, slow enough that I can stop her. I don't? "Jonathan," she says softly, "everything meaningful risks damage. That's not a flaw. That's the price." I look down at her, really look at her, and feel something crack under my ribs. The realization settles with terrifying clarity. The contract was never protection. It was an excuse. A way to pretend this was controlled, temporary, safe. But nothing about Esther has been safe. Midnight is approaching. I can feel it like a countdown in my bones. The ending is looming, and for the first time in my life, I don't want efficiency. I want time. "You'll leave," I say quietly. Not as a statement, as a fear. "Yes," she answers honestly, "because that's what we agreed to." Honesty hurts more than false comfort would have. She reaches out, hesitates, then rests her hand lightly against my chest, over my heart, like she knows exactly where to place it. "But," she adds, "that doesn't mean this was nothing." Her hand lingers for a moment longer before she steps back, and that's when I understand. I'm not afraid of losing her. I'm afraid of what remains when she's gone, because the man I was before her doesn't exist anymore. And the man I'm becoming doesn't know how to stand alone. The contract is a lie, and I signed it anyway.
Midnight doesn't announce itself. It creeps. It sits quietly in corners, waiting for someone to acknowledge it. And in Jonathan Hale's house, time had always behaved like that, unnoticed unless summoned. I sat on the edge of the couch, knees pulled to my chest, listening to the house breathe. The lights were dimmed low, the city outside reduced to distant glitter. Somewhere upstairs, A clock ticked steadily, marking seconds like they mattered. I'd never been good at endings, especially quiet ones. Jonathan stood across the room near the window, arms crossed like he was holding himself together by force alone. He hadn't said anything since our conversation in the kitchen, not because he was angry, but because he was unraveling in that silent, internal way of his. And I saw it now. Not as mystery, not as distance, as fear. "You know," I said softly, breaking the quiet, "most people hate Valentine's Day because it reminds them they're alone." He didn't turn. "I don't hate it." "No," I agreed. "You don't feel anything about it. That's worse." That made him look at me. His eyes were darker now, stripped of the careful neutrality he wore so well. Tired, exposed, human. "You think I'm lonely," he said. "I think," I replied gently. "You were lonely long before today. You just learned how to survive it." He considered that, jaw tightening. "I don't need saving," he said. "I know," I said quickly. "That's not what this is." I stood and walked toward him, slow and deliberate. No teasing, no playful defiance, just honesty. When I stopped in front of him, I didn't reach for his hand. I didn't touch him at all. I just looked up. "You don't know how to let people stay," I said quietly, "and you punish yourself for wanting them to." His breath hitched, just barely. "I don't punish myself," he replied. "Yes, you do," I said softly. "You retreat. You tighten rules. You turn feeling into a failure instead of a signal." He shook his head. "You make it sound intentional." "It is," I said, "just not conscious." Silence stretched between us again, but it wasn't empty this time. It was thick with understanding. "I saw you," I continued, choosing my words carefully. "When you smiled, when you panicked afterward, when you tried to put distance between us like closeness had betrayed you." His gaze dropped to the floor. "No one ever told you it was safe to want," I said. He swallowed hard. I stepped closer then, closing the space he'd kept so carefully measured. This time, he didn't step back. "You don't know what happens after someone stays," I said, "so you don't let them." He looked at me then, really looked at me, and something in his eyes finally broke. "I don't know how to be enough," he said quietly. The words shattered me. "Oh, Jonathan," I whispered, reaching up without thinking, resting my hand against his chest again. "You were always enough. You were just alone with it." He didn't stop me this time, didn't flinch. His hand came up slowly, hovering near my wrist like he wasn't sure if he was allowed to touch me. I covered his hand with mine. "You're not broken," I said firmly. "You're just inexperienced with being cared for." "That's worse," he murmured. "It means I missed something." "No," I shook my head gently. "It means you're learning it now." We stood there, close enough that I could feel his heartbeat beneath my palm, steady but fast, like a man standing on the edge of something unfamiliar. "I leave tomorrow," I said softly. His shoulders tensed. "I know," he replied. "But I need you to understand something before I go," I continued. What we shared, it wasn't a performance, not for me." He searched my face, cautious hope flickering dangerously close to the surface. "You didn't imagine it," I said. "You didn't do it wrong, and you didn't scare me away." I slid my hand into his, threading our fingers together fully this time. He squeezed back without realizing it. "What scares me," I admitted, "is that you think this only works because there was a contract." His brow furrowed. "You think the moment the rules disappear," I said, "you'll lose control, or fail, or be left." He didn't deny it. I rose onto my toes slightly, just enough to meet his gaze head on. "Jonathan," I said quietly, "love doesn't need permission. It just needs honesty." He exhaled slowly, like he'd been holding his breath for years. "I don't know how to do this," he said. I smiled sadly. "Neither do I, and I've done it plenty." That earned me the smallest huff of a laugh from him, barely there, but real. "I don't want to be something you practice and forget," he said. "You won't," I promised. Because firsts don't disappear. They change you. We stayed like that for a long time, hands joined, hearts open, neither of us pretending this was easy. When I finally pulled back, it felt deliberate, necessary. I need you to choose, I said gently. Not tonight, not under a countdown, but soon. He nodded slowly, and for the first time since I met him, I saw it clearly. Not a billionaire afraid of losing control, but a boy who had never been chosen and was terrified of hoping he might be now. The house felt different after that conversation. Not warmer exactly, but quieter in a way that wasn't empty, like something had finally been said out loud and the walls were listening now, holding their breath. Jonathan didn't retreat after I stepped back. That alone felt monumental. We moved around each other carefully after that, not avoiding, not clinging, just aware. Every step felt deliberate. Every glance carried weight. He watched me the way someone watches the edge of a cliff, not because they want to fall, but because they're finally considering the jump. I went into the kitchen to make tea, not because I needed it, but because I needed something normal, something small. My hands shook a little as I filled the kettle. Jonathan leaned against the counter nearby, close enough that I could feel his presence without touching him. His sleeves were rolled again, his tie long gone. He looked less like a man on display and more like someone real, someone standing in the aftermath of a truth he couldn't undo. "You don't have to be careful with me," he said quietly. I glanced at him. "I know." "Then why are you?" he asked. I smiled softly. "Because I want you to stay." His jaw tightened, but he didn't look away this time. "I'm not good at this," he said, at responding when things shift. "That's okay," I replied. "I'll show you." He studied my face, searching for something. Doubt, maybe. Manipulation. Anything that would let him retreat safely. He found none. So I stepped closer. Not abruptly, not dramatically. Just one step. I closed the space slowly enough that he could stop me at any point. He didn't. His breath changed when I was close. Slower, deeper, like his body knew something his mind was still catching up to. "Last time," I said softly, "we rushed." He nodded. I didn't know what to do. "I know." I reached up, resting my hands lightly against his chest again, not pressing, not pulling, feeling his heartbeat steady under my palms. "This time," I whispered, "we'll take it apart." His hands hovered near my waist, uncertain. I noticed the restraint there, the way he waited, the way he refused to assume permission. "Here," I said gently, guiding one of his hands to my side. "You can hold me." His fingers curled slowly, like he was memorizing the shape of me through touch, like he was afraid if he moved too fast, I'd disappear. I rose onto my toes again, not quite enough to reach him fully, but enough to bring our faces close enough that our noses brushed this time on purpose. He inhaled sharply. "Jonathan," I murmured, my voice barely more than breath. "Don't think." "I don't know how not to," he said. "Then follow me." I tilted my head first, gave him the angle, gave him the answer. And then I leaned in. This time, our lips met properly. Soft, slow, still awkward, but intentional. He didn't freeze. He didn't pull away. He followed. His mouth moved hesitantly at first, like he was asking a question with every motion. I answered each one gently, slowing him down, keeping it simple. Teaching without teaching. His hand tightened at my waist. Just a little. And when his lips pressed back, tentative but real, I felt it. The moment he chose to be present instead of perfect. I pulled back just enough to look at him. He looked stunned, like the ground had shifted and he was still upright somehow. "That," I said softly, smiling up at him, "was good." He swallowed. "You didn't mess it up," I interrupted. "You stayed." That seemed to hit harder than praise. He leaned his forehead against mine, eyes closed, breath uneven. "I practiced," he admitted quietly. I blinked. "You what?" "I practiced," he repeated, voice low and embarrassed. "After the first time. I didn't want to fail again. Something warm and achy bloomed in my chest. With what? I asked gently, already knowing. His ears turned red. A pillow. I laughed, not mocking, not teasing, just soft, affectionate laughter that spilled out before I could stop it. "Oh, Jonathan," I said, touching his cheek. "That might be the sweetest thing anyone's ever done for me." He pulled back, alarmed. It wasn't adequate preparation. "No," I smiled, "but it was brave." He stared at me, like bravery was a concept he'd never associated with himself before. We stayed like that for a while, foreheads touching, bodies close, neither of us rushing. No urgency, no countdown, just a moment that existed because we let it. Eventually, I rested my head against his chest. He stiffened for half a second, then relaxed, arms folding around me carefully, like he was afraid of breaking something precious. "I don't want this to end," he said quietly. I closed my eyes. Neither do I. But we both knew. Morning would come, and with it, choices. Still, for that moment, held against the man who was learning how to feel, I allowed myself to believe in something fragile and beautiful. Because sometimes love doesn't arrive loud. Sometimes it arrives as a second kiss, and stays. Morning doesn't ask permission. It arrives anyway, thin light slipping through the glass walls, stretching across floors that had learned a new kind of warmth overnight. I woke before the sun fully rose, lying still, listening to the slow rhythm of Jonathan's breathing beside me. He slept like someone unused to not being alone, careful even in rest, on his back, hands folded loosely, like he wasn't sure what to do with them yet. His face was softer in sleep, stripped of calculation and restraint, younger, somehow, vulnerable in a way he'd never allow himself to be awake. I watched him longer than I should have. This, him, was the dangerous part. Not the money, not the mansion, not the power. The man who had let me see him without armor. I slipped out of bed quietly, careful not to wake him. The shirt I wore, his shirt, hung loose on my frame, sleeves falling past my wrists. I didn't change it, not yet. I wanted to hold on to the feeling a little longer. In the bathroom, I stared at my reflection. My smile was there, but softer, thoughtful. The kind you wear when you already miss something that hasn't ended yet. This was always temporary, I reminded myself. A day, a contract, nothing promised. And yet, nothing about it felt small. I packed slowly again, folding my clothes with deliberate care, like rushing might undo something. Each sound felt too loud in the quiet house, the zip of my bag, the soft click of my shoes. I paused at the doorway, taking one last look at the room. Jonathan still slept. Part of me wanted to wake him, to explain, to ask questions I wasn't sure I wanted answers to. But the truth was simpler and harder. If I stayed any longer, leaving would hurt more. So I went downstairs. The kitchen greeted me with familiar stillness. I made coffee, careful this time not to disturb the order too much. I poured it into a mug I knew he used, set it on the counter where he'd find it. A small thing. A goodbye he wouldn't hear. I was halfway to the door when I heard his voice. "Esther." I stopped. Turned. He stood at the edge of the hallway, hair rumpled, eyes still heavy with sleep, but alert now. Awake, present. "You're leaving," he said. Not a question. "Yes," I answered softly. He took a step forward, then another, barefoot, unguarded. The distance between us closed too quickly, like gravity had finally decided to act. "I didn't ask you to stay," he said. "No," I replied. "You didn't." "I should have," he added quietly. My chest tightened. "You're not late," I said gently. "You're just careful." He looked down at the floor, jaw flexing. I don't know how to ask someone not to leave. I crossed the remaining space and took his hands in mine. "You don't have to," I said. "Not yet." "But you're going anyway," he said. "Yes," I admitted, "because I need to know something." He looked at me then, really looked at me, with fear naked in his eyes. "What?" he asked. I need to know that if you come after me, I said softly, it won't be because the contract expired. He stilled. If you choose me, I continued, it has to be because you want me, not because you're afraid of being alone again. Silence stretched between us. I saw it then, the war behind his eyes, the instinct to retreat, the urge to reach, control battling desire. I don't know how to separate the two, he said. That's okay, I said, smiling sadly. That's what time is for. I let go of his hands slowly, deliberately, giving him the chance to stop me. He didn't. Not because he didn't want to, because he was still learning how. I shouldered my bag and walked toward the door. Every step felt heavier than the last. I didn't look back until my hand rested on the handle. I meant what I said, I told him. This wasn't nothing. He nodded once. I know. Good, I said softly. Then don't let it stay small. I opened the door and stepped out into the morning air. The gate closed behind me with the same quiet finality as before. But this time, it didn't feel like the end. It felt like a pause. And somewhere behind me, in a house that had learned what warmth felt like, a man stood at the edge of his old life, wondering if he was brave enough to leave it behind. I didn't expect him to come after me. Not because I didn't believe in him, but because I understood him. Jonathan Hale was a man built on routine, on control, on endings that happened cleanly and quietly. Men like that didn't chase. They calculated. They accepted loss as collateral damage and called it maturity. So when I stepped out into the morning air and felt the city swallow me whole again, noise, movement, strangers brushing past, I told myself not to look back. I hailed a cab with shaking fingers and gave my address. The door shut. The car pulled away. And just like that, the mansion disappeared behind a turn of the road. I pressed my forehead to the window and exhaled slowly. You did the right thing, I told myself. You gave him space to choose. Time passed in strange, elastic fragments after that. I showered, changed, put my life back on like clothing that didn't quite fit the same way anymore. My phone stayed silent on the counter, screen dark, unmoving. I didn't check it. I refused to. Because waiting for someone to choose you can turn hope into a wound if you're not careful. By late afternoon, I was sitting on my couch, staring at nothing, when there was a knock at the door. Not loud, not hesitant. Precise. My heart jumped into my throat. I stood slowly, every instinct screaming, don't assume, don't hope. My hand trembled as I reached for the handle. I opened the door. Jonathan stood there. No suit, no tie, no armor. Just him, hair slightly disheveled, sleeves rolled carelessly, jacket forgotten entirely. His posture was rigid, but his eyes were alive in a way I'd never seen before. Like he'd crossed a line he couldn't uncross. You left your coffee, he said. I blinked, then laughed softly, breath catching halfway through. You came all this way to return a mug? No, he said immediately. I came because I couldn't stay. The words hit me like a held breath finally released. I stepped aside without thinking. Come in. He entered my apartment and looked around like he was taking inventory. Small space, mismatched furniture, warmth in every corner. Lived in. Human. This is where you live, he said. Yes. He nodded, like he was committing it to memory. We stood there awkwardly for a moment, the air between us charged with everything unsaid. I crossed my arms loosely, not defensive, just grounding myself. So, I said lightly, did you break a routine to be here? He huffed once. I broke all of them. That made me smile. I realized something after you left, he continued, voice steady but raw. I reviewed every reason I had for letting you go. And? I asked quietly. And none of them were honest. My chest tightened. I told myself it was about timing, about not knowing how, about protecting myself from loss, he said. But the truth is, I was afraid that choosing you would mean admitting how empty everything was before. I swallowed. That's a hard thing to admit, I said. Yes, he replied, but easier than waking up tomorrow and pretending you were just a day. He stepped closer. Not too close. Close enough. "I don't know how to do this perfectly," he said. "I don't know how to be easy or spontaneous or emotionally fluent." I met his gaze. "I'm not looking for perfection." "I know," he said. "That's why I'm here." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out the folded contract. The paper was creased now, worn. "I tore this up," he said simply. A laugh bubbled up in my chest, soft, disbelieving. "Jonathan." "I didn't replace it with another one," he added quickly. "I didn't negotiate new terms. I didn't try to define what comes next." My breath caught. "I just came to ask," he said, voice dropping, "if you'd be willing to see what happens when I choose without rules." I stepped closer this time. I closed the distance myself. "That's terrifying," I said softly. "Yes," he agreed, "but it's also the first decision I've made that feels right." I studied him, the man who had never learned how to ask someone to stay, standing in my small living room with nothing but honesty in his hands. "Good," I said, "because I don't want to be chosen carefully." A slow, genuine smile broke across his face, unrestrained, unafraid. Not the one that slipped out by accident. The one he allowed. I reached up, touching his cheek lightly, grounding him. "Welcome to the part where nothing is guaranteed," I whispered. He leaned into my touch, eyes closing briefly. I've had guarantees, they were empty. Then he kissed me. Not rushed, not hesitant. Certain. And I knew, without a doubt, that whatever came next wouldn't be safe or simple. But it would be real. And for the first time, he wasn't watching the edge. He'd stepped off it. The first thing Jonathan did was ruin his own kitchen. I noticed it because he looked vaguely distressed about it, standing in the doorway with a grocery bag in one hand and a frown pulling at his mouth like the room had personally betrayed him. "I bought the wrong salt," he said. I blinked. "There's wrong salt?" "Yes," he replied seriously. "This one is coarse." I laughed, leaning against the counter of his mansion kitchen, the same counter that had once felt untouchable, sacred, sterile. Now there was a half-cut lemon sitting directly on the surface, a dish towel draped where it didn't belong, a chair pulled out at a crooked angle. Proof of life. "It'll be fine," I said, stepping closer. "Steak doesn't care." He looked at me like that was a radical philosophy. "I care," he said. I smiled. I know. That was how it started. Not with fireworks or declarations or sweeping gestures, but with Jonathan Hale, billionaire, master of order, enemy of chaos, standing barefoot in his own kitchen, sleeves rolled unevenly, trying to cook dinner for two without turning it into a system. I stayed. Not as a contract. Not as a test. Not as a performance. I stayed because when he chose me, he didn't do it halfway. The days that followed were awkward, gentle, surprisingly funny. Jonathan learned that mornings didn't need schedules if they had coffee and sunlight, that conversations could wander and still arrive somewhere meaningful. That silence didn't always need fixing, it just needed sharing. He learned how to sit close without bracing. How to reach for my hand without thinking first. How to laugh and not apologize afterward. I learned his quiet tells. The way he straightened his watch when nervous. How he paused before sitting beside me, like a final check-in with himself. The way he looked at me sometimes, like he was still shocked I hadn't vanished. One evening, I found him in the bedroom, standing in front of the mirror with an expression that suggested intense internal debate. "What are you doing?" I asked. He hesitated, smiling. I bit my lip. "You practicing again?" "Yes," he said. Then, after a beat, "Is it noticeable?" I crossed the room and cupped his face, forcing him to look at me. His smile was tentative, but real. "It's perfect," I said. "I don't trust that word," he replied. "Then trust me," I said instead. He did. Valentine's Day came again quietly. No gala. No cameras. No expectations. Just the two of us at the kitchen table, our table now, plates mismatched, candles slightly uneven, music low. Jonathan cooked steak again, But this time he let me season it, let me taste it, let me change things. When he sat down across from me, his knee brushed mine without tension. Progress. To us, I said, lifting my glass. He raised his. To choosing. Later, curled against him on the couch, I felt his arm settle around my shoulders with easy familiarity. Not careful, not rehearsed. Natural. You know, he said quietly, I used to think love was something people either had or didn't. I tilted my head to look up at him. And now? Now I think it's something you practice, he said. But not alone. I smiled. His lips brushed my hair, absent, affectionate, real. And in that moment, I understood something simple and profound. Jonathan Hale didn't need to become someone else to love. He just needed someone to stay long enough to show him how. Valentine's wasn't rewritten with grand gestures or perfect words. It was rewritten in shared space, in ruined kitchens, in second kisses and third laughs and mornings that didn't end. And when he smiled at me across the table, unafraid, unguarded, chosen, I knew this story wouldn't fade quietly. Because love doesn't always arrive loudly. Sometimes it arrives as a man who learns how to cook for two, and never wants to go back.
If the stars fell from the sky and the world ran out of time, if I lost my way, forgot who I could be, would you still love me? Would you still love me when I'm broken? When my words are left unspoken? When the light fades and the darkness is all you see, would you still love me? If my dreams crumble to dust and my heart forgot to trust, if the pieces of my soul scattered endlessly, would you still love me?